Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library. And today I have a great guest on because it's always a pleasure to talk to entrepreneurs that are also podcast hosts. Because one of the things that I realize in doing a podcast is that you hear so many stories. And when you're in the constant habit of talking about what you do or asking other people about what they do, you tend to get a perspective that's a bit broader than if you were just working in your own business. So it is a pleasure to have on Andy Kaufman. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Thank you, Charles. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, before we jump into talking about your business and your podcast, what was your background before, you went into entrepreneurship years ago?
Yeah, I actually started my career as a software developer. So even to this day, I'm a software developer at heart. But as with happens with a lot of people, I'm sure the people listening, that they start in one place. And sometimes if you get good at that, you get promoted to manage that. And I destroyed my teams. I got promoted to be a manager of software developers, and I had to learn so much that, it's not about just being their buddy. It's not about doing all the work for them, how to delegate, and some really important lessons. Became a director, vice president, but I got to the that led eventually to why I wanted to get out of there too. But my background at its core was IT throughout before starting the business.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I think that's a very interesting thing because, you bring up an interesting point about when you're doing a great job, the natural thing is, oh, we should move that person up to a leader. And, there's very little preparation to actually help you be successful at being a leader, as opposed to just being an individual contributor.
So true. And it's sometimes called the halo effect, right? Well, they're good at this, so surely they're going to be good at that. And you see this with salespeople, like, let's make her a sales manager. Let's make him a call center manager, but he was really good on the phone. And I did this to one guy I promoted because I thought he'd be really good. And it was about, I'll try, but it couldn't have been more than 3 months afterwards. He came up to me, he goes, "You gotta get me out of this role." I'm like, "What do you mean? I'm drinking too much. I can't sleep in there." He goes, "I hate it." And and so we did, at his request. And about 5 years later, he was at a company in a good leadership role. So in some ways, maybe we just served the wine before it's time, right? We put him in the position, like you said, we didn't really prepare him well enough. And so that probably carries over to us as entrepreneurs as well. Sometimes that we don't do the runway onto it. Think about that enough of what does it take to be more than just a technical specialist of something, but to really run an organization.
Yeah, I would say kudos to that gentleman. I mean, to be able to have the humility to be honest enough to say, hey, you know what, the leadership is probably not the right fit for me, because I often wonder if, if some people that are, put in a leadership position, it's like, do they feel like they have the ability to go say that, hey, you know what, the timing's not right for me being in a leadership position. Maybe I should go back to what I was doing because I was a better contributor. I added more value doing that as opposed to now.
Yeah. It's really true. Like, how often do you hear that story? You don't hear that. You hear more of, they're like, all right, I guess I'm stuck here, and they struggle, and then they end up losing their job or something like that, or get accused of being the Peter principle. They got promoted beyond their ability to do it. But yeah, that's actually a good point that he did and it did mark him. Like he did take a step back and then launched later on. So yeah, that's probably a message for somebody listening.
Awesome, awesome. So, I mean, as you progressed through your career, got to the executive levels and growing, was it a turning point, or was it like an event, or just, over time, how did it really set in your mind that, hey, you know what, I want to actually build my own business. I want to actually leave this and actually start building something.
About 7 years before I started my company, we were using some reasonably innovative technology for some projects, and the technology was from Microsoft. And so we got a call, and a guy from Microsoft said, "Hey, Andy, would you present at our upcoming Tech Ed conference?" Now, I'd gone to Tech Ed before, and I thought, "Man, that'd be kind of cool. That'd be pretty cool." But before I said yes, I said, "Real quick, how many people are going to be there?" And he goes, "In that session, there should be about 7,500 people being part." And so, yeah, no, backstory. If I was presenting in front of 10 people at that time, I'd be freaked out. I mean, I would be not having trouble, sleeping the night before. 7,500 people, and somehow the words, "Okay, let's do it," came out of my lips. Like I have no idea why I said yes to that, and it was only got like about a week and a half or so runway before it's going to happen. I barely slept that whole week. I was, it was crazy, but it went reasonably well. I mean, it went well enough that they go, "Would you do this again at a different conference? Not for like 7 minutes, do it for like an hour long thing." And that put a little bit of seed into, and then I'd start speaking at conferences, maybe a couple times a year. I had a very supportive boss in that regard. And eventually someone came up and said, "Hey, do you do this for a living?" And I'm like, "You can do this for a living? Like, how does that work?" And so I started talking to people, started hanging out with people that were doing it. And there was this sense of, man, I wonder if it's possible. Like, I wonder if I could do it, So that was kind of like the vision for it, and got to the point eventually where I don't want to be 70 someday if I get to live that long and wish I would have tried. So let's try it. And so that was kind of like it wasn't a wake up in the middle of the night. Like, I've talked to some people that was like that, of like, I'm 40 or I'm whatever, and I'm going to quit this job. I'm going to start something new. It was definitely an evolution over time, but it was to the point where I don't want to wish I would have done this. I want to try it. And if it doesn't work out, there's probably another IT job out there somewhere. Yeah. So that was 2001 when I launched, 2 weeks before 9/11.
Wow. Okay.
Could have been a worse time. Could have been a worse time to start a business in some way.
That probably wasn't the time people were like, hey, let's see if we can bring him in. Yeah, things probably went on hold for business for a little while.
Yeah, and if there was any benefit, it's not like I had this big book of business that went away. Like in the pandemic world, sometimes people were like, we got blindsided and everything went away. It wasn't that. I was starting from nothing anyway, but still, it was a good learning experience though, Trail, because it was one of those things where I think if the first couple of months of something goes well, sometimes we get entitled. It's like, oh, this is easy, and I didn't have that feeling at
all. I think that I can understand that because I stepped away from my full-time my corporate role to start my fractional CFO company pretty much in March. At the end of March was when I stepped away from my full. So yeah, it's like every client that you get now, it's just like it's ingrained in me to do the fundamental work, because like I said, there were no easy wins through the pandemic of trying to build a business. So yeah, I do think that when you're starting at a tough time, it definitely reinforces those fundamentals you will need to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I got to tell you, it reminded me, and you will never forget. I mean, none of us will ever forget 2020, but it's one of those things that I feel like we know what it's like when things are really thin. And so it's what does it take to keep in the game and to continue to innovate? I mean, check you out in this last year, how you've innovated in this last year. And there's some pretty cool statistics on number of new businesses started in 2020. Yeah. Like, well, it's every change truly does have an opportunity. And that's not just some cheesy meme. I mean, it really is true. So, and sometimes small businesses are the perfect ones to do it.
Absolutely. I agree. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, your podcast. So can you tell the audience a little bit about, what your podcast is about, and, when can they expect episodes to come out?
Yeah. So most of what we do is project management and leadership workshops and keynotes. So that's the main business. And in 2009, a guy reached out and he goes, "Hey, I've got a podcast." In 2009, what's a podcast? I mean, I'd heard of it, but I really didn't know much about it. But so anyway, I was interviewed for it, and then I didn't know him great, but we started a conversation. I'm like, "So tell me more about what is this podcast? Like, what's your workflow? What's the technology?" And I'm like, "I think I could do that. I'm a geek at heart." And so I'm sure episode 1 was listened maybe by my mom and dad. That was it. But that was 309 episodes ago or something like that. And it's just the podcast is called the People and Projects Podcast. And the name implies it's about people and projects. So it's about the intersection between leadership and project management. How do we lead teams? how do we deliver projects? And so it's interviews and insights related to that. Primarily interviews. It's rarely just me. It's almost always interviewing somebody else.
Okay, nice, nice. And then how often are you guys releasing an episode?
Our goal is at least twice a month because I, and this is a good entrepreneur lesson is I am so nitpicky with certain stuff, So eventually I outsource some of the initial editing, but there's some of the stuff like I pick individual music for every episode.
Oh,
Why?
wow.
Because I care about it for some reason. I'm nitpicky about it. So we it depends on the season. Like this week I've got 8 speaking engagements, and some of them are all day. So I mean, and some of them are in the evening. So I'm doing it in addition to that full-time thing. And I've got some team members that help, but one of the hardest things for entrepreneurs is what to hold on to and what to let go, and not let go enough of it. And so on the podcast, there's a lot of it I don't let go. So that holds back episodes. But for me, it's more important that the experience of that episode than every week on Thursday at noon that it drops. And so that's kind of how we've drawn the line and built something.
Okay, nice, nice. And then speaking of, I guess you say that, that at being able to let go, I think that's, something that's very important from a leadership aspect, as we were talking earlier, going from, being an individual contributor to being a leader. And so I want to talk a little bit about, the Institute of Leadership Development and, like I said, the core of your business. So what do you guys do there, and how do you help leaders, transition through, developing through that journey?
Yeah, it really depends on what the presenting issue is. So, like this morning, there was a group over in Europe, and what they want to do is they want to get better at delivering projects, and they want to get their certifications for project management. So sometimes our workshops are helping people just learn about project management. Sometimes it's about, well, we do project management, we want to get a certification. Earlier this week, it was a group of people that are part of a program that are just developing their leadership skills. And so that was with a group in Europe and Africa. And so it just depends on what the presenting issue is. But almost always someone comes to us and says, we've got this group that we want to help develop their ability to lead, like maybe we put them into positions that they weren't ready for, like you and I were talking about earlier, or they want to take the next step up. And so usually if it's leadership related, the answer isn't just a training session. It's something with maybe some coaching and some assessments and some training as well. It depends on what the issue is. With project management, a lot of times what we'll do is training sessions. So it might be a keynote at a conference, or it might be, let's get this group of people together and for a number of sessions over time, build up their ability to deliver projects. So it depends on the situation, but I mean, we're as busy as we've ever been. We're just as busy during the pandemic as we were before the pandemic, just a lot more over, Zoom and other technologies like that.
Gotcha. Awesome. Now, so if someone's looking to, do business with you or to find out what you're up to, kind of what your speaking calendar looks like, where can they find you online or on social media?
Probably the most value as an entry point, we just listen, check out the podcast. Listen to Terrell first, but after that, People in Projects Podcast, it's, certainly peopleinprojectspodcast.com, but it could be also any podcast app. And that would just be introduced. And we focus on people who are thought leaders, primarily on the leadership side and some on the project management side. But the truth is, so much of project management is leadership. So much of it is, it's not the technical part of delivering projects nearly as much as how do we get stakeholders to get their work done and get people to agree to things. And so that's the primary focus. So that'd be a great entry point. And if someone has a conference coming up and they're looking for speakers on how to get things done and how to develop their people, the Institute website will be in your show notes, but it's i-leadonline.com. So it stands for the Institute for Leadership Excellence and Development online.com.
Awesome. Now, one of the questions I'm curious about is, with switching a lot of what you have been doing this year to virtual and doing it online, how do you feel about, the reception? Because usually when you're in a room, you can get feedback from the audience as you're, giving a speech or going through a training. Like, how has that changed the dynamics of, kind of your delivery?
Yeah. What's really interesting, the asset, because um, this was about a decade ago. I got a call from a group over in Italy, and they go, "We really want you to lead some sessions, but we're gonna have people from all over the world, and it doesn't make sense to fly you and everyone in the same place." So we started doing virtual about a decade ago, and I
Okay.
want to tell you that helps so much. And honestly, for entrepreneurs, this is probably my single biggest lesson: is when opportunities come up, unless there's a compelling reason to say no, say yes. So at that time, I didn't have all this experience doing virtual. How about back in that tech ed conference? I didn't even want to. I was freaked out. Death would have been worse than saying yes. But as entrepreneurs, almost always, unless there's a compelling reason, like ethics, there can be reasons to say no. But um, often entrepreneurs, we start something and we think this is where we're going, but we say yes and it blossoms into something else that wouldn't have happened if we didn't say yes. So learning to say yes has provided opportunities to do so many things that I wouldn't have dreamt of. And so in the virtual setting, I was able to develop a lot of like, and please, no, I'm not saying they're unique to me, but techniques to engage people that would be different than just droning on into a camera. And
Gotcha.
so, I mean, it's pretty standard now. People are used to breakout rooms and using chat boxes and using other sorts of things. But just to show you where a client was in April, so we all know that this lockdowns in most of the world by then. A client, she just said, "Well, no, we're going to cancel. We're going to cancel the classes we have scheduled until things open up." I'm like, "Would you just trust me on this? Just try one. You can cancel all the rest, but just let's try one." She goes, "Virtual could never be the same." She's like, "It'll never be the same." I'm like, "I mostly agree with you, but I'm telling you, try it." And the feedback from that session was so strong that she called me the next day and she goes, "You got to tell me everything you know, because I've never seen anything like that for a virtual session." So that's less about just me and mostly about the fact that we can find ways to use these tools effectively. And a boring live session is not going to be made better over Zoom, right? And so, and yet, like you said, it's difficult to get feedback in the same way. But there are definitely ways to get feedback. Like I had a group of 60 leaders from Africa 2 weeks ago, where we were going through a session on managing up. And I'm telling you, although most of them spoke pretty good English, French was one of their primary languages. There were all kinds of reasons why this could have been a really difficult thing, but we had a fabulous session because we can make this engaging. Uh, I just call on people. I just like, all right. So instead of waiting for them, I say, "Okay, yeah. So Terrell, real quick, what's your take on this?" And all of a sudden, once they realize, "Man, I called on him, he may call on me next," and so it just gets people involved. So there are ways to do it. There are ways to do it that I don't feel like I'm necessarily particularly gifted in it. I just have some experience doing it, and all of us can get better. Right? It's just a skill to develop.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, one of the questions that I like to ask every guest that comes on is, when you think about, the work that you've done, you think about kind of what your journey has been like and what it's been like building a business around, what you're great at doing, what you enjoy doing, and all the changes, what's two pieces of advice that you would share with other entrepreneurs?
That say yes one is definitely would be one of them, and I've just seen that pay off so many times. There's a former researcher from Harvard who's no longer alive, but he said we're most motivated if we only have a 50 to 70% likelihood of success. So think about that.
Wow.
Because deep down, don't we sometimes want 100%? Like, I don't want to say yes to that client unless I know I'm going to be successful. But he said, and I get that, we don't want to go in and fail, but we're not as motivated if we have 100% likelihood of success. And I think sometimes entrepreneurs get into a rut just doing what we can do, what we know we're awesome at.
Mhm.
And there's something about focus, so I get that. But there's also this opportunity to innovate when we only have a 50 to 70% likelihood of success. Say yes. Say yes. And I think that can make a big difference. I think who we surround ourselves with would be also something that I think it'd be pretty standard advice, but let me give you an example of this. I was in business for probably 17 years by the point where this conversation happened, but I'm having lunch with a guy And in some ways, a conversation like this. And he goes, Andy, as best I can tell, your strategy is arrogant and selfish. All right. And I was buying lunch, man. I was buying it. He telling me that. But here's the deal. I said, tell me more. What you mean? He goes, you think you're the only one who can deliver your material. I'm like, I don't think that. He goes, how many other people have delivered your material? Possible. And so he goes, you know what? There are other people that can deliver your material, but it's selfish. You're holding back from giving those opportunities. And so this was like this giant slap in the face that I needed, Terrell, because I'm willing to surround myself pretty enthusiastically with people who think differently than me, because we just need these different perspectives. And we had a guest on the podcast a while back, Herminia Ibarra. She's London School of Business professor, brilliant. She goes, left to our own devices, we build networks that are narcissistic and lazy, which is basically saying we surround ourselves with people like us. And so we miss these opportunities to see other perspectives. So between saying yes and who you surround yourself with, are there people who are making you better? Are they people who are holding you back? Are they people that are telling you what you want to hear? Are they people who are telling you what you don't want to hear? So whether it be some sort of mastermind, whether it's taking advantage of resources like Business Talk Library, like get other perspectives, because none of us are smart enough. We're not smart enough on our own. And we're biased and we're blind, and we just need people to tell us those things, that it's not natural. I think Herminia is right. Left to our own devices, we don't do that.
Wow. I think that is amazing advice. So Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your background, your story, what you're doing in your business. And also, we'll include the link so people can go check out your podcast, so they can get more wisdom and exposure to, like I said, all the different perspectives you bring on your show and all the different perspectives that you share. So Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Privileged to be part of the library, man. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.